So we're going to skip ahead a little bit this week, and instead of finishing our animal eyes, since we're out of the building, we are going to focus on planning for our landscape project. Ignore the bell. So one of the big things that we're going to be learning about for our landscape project is how to show space. So how to show that some things are closer and some things are further away from us, basically to create that illusion. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, and that's what I'm going to have you working on this week. So I'm going to show you the 6 different ways to show space, and then on your own, you're going to illustrate those for me. Okay, so the first one's pretty easy and it's pretty obvious. It's something you probably do all the time anyway without thinking about it, but overlapping. So overlapping is just when one object covers part of the second object. So for example, this cone is in front of the sphere, and I know that because it's blocking part of the sphere, right? Just like the sphere is in front of this cube. So you guys do that all the time without thinking about it, but actually just overlapping, shows that sense of that something is in front of something else. Okay, size. Again, something you probably do without thinking about it. But when we're showing space, things that are closer to us are larger versus the things that are smaller, that are further away are smaller. So like we know that these lampposts are all the same size, but because the artist has drawn them getting smaller, going back in space, it gives us this illusion that, that there is space there and that the lampposts aren't side by side. They're, going back in space. Just like we know that this lamppost would actually be bigger than these buildings, but because these buildings are smaller, we know that they're further away. Placement. Okay, so this means where you're putting your objects on your paper. Okay, so objects that you put at the bottom of your paper are the foreground. Those mean that they're closest to us. So, for example, in this picture, this lamppost would be in the foreground, right? So the bottom of it is at the bottom of the paper. Things in the middle are going to be in the middle ground. So they're not super close to us. They're kind of in between, right? They're not the things that are furthest away, but they're kind of in between. So in this example, like these lampposts and the water would probably be about the middle. So it's not as far away as these things, but it's not as close as, this lamppost here, right? So kind of in the middle. And then our background are the things that are furthest away from us. So they're going to be the furthest back on the paper. For example, like these buildings are further away. So notice how they're set further back than like the water or the lamppost, right? Or even like this road in the very, very back. Notice how they're going back in space. And then of course our sky would be the furthest away, and that's our, very background. But for showing space, we want to have more than just the sky, right? We want to have things that are closest to us, kind of close to us, and then further away from us. So this is all about where you're putting it in your image. Okay, detail. So when you're thinking about where things are going, the things that are closest to us, we see better, right? Makes sense. So like in this picture, our foreground is right in here with these flowers and this grass. So I can see these flowers better than I can these flowers. So notice how I can like see all the little petals and I can see the texture. So when you have things that are closer, it's really important to give them more detail so the viewer knows that they're closer as well. Okay. Things that are further away are less visible. So notice how, these flowers have less detail. So as things go back in space, you don't have to give them quite as much time and attention as the things that are closest to us. We really want those things to pop out. So things closer, more detail, further away, less detail. All right, color. And this is probably the hardest one for people to understand. So as we see things further away, they change in color as well. And that's because just like detail, our eyes are able to see color when we are closer. So for example, in these mountains, right? I know that there's trees on all of these mountains. I'm able to see this better because it's closer to me, so I'm able to see the green of the trees. Notice how the image, when the image goes back, that like the trees now are starting to take on kind of like a darker, almost like bluish haze. And then like here, I can hardly even see, like it's kind of like a hazy blue, gray, green. And as I go further and further back, it becomes, just kind of like a blue gray. So the point is, as things are further away from us, they are less saturated. So we see the color a little bit less. And that can look different depending on the image, but like in this image, I would start with like greens and then I would fade to like kind of a desaturated blue green and then bluish gray. Now in something like this image, I'm going to move my box here. So even like in a city, the buildings that are closest to us, the colors are going to be a little bit more vivid and bright than buildings that are further away. So for example, these buildings are really bright, but the ones down the street are probably just as bright. I just can't see them as well. So again, I'm going to use my brighter colors closer to me and my duller colors further away. And you can dull things really easily by, just like layering a little bit of gray over them, or, not using as much pressure, or dulling them down with a little bit of like blue in this situation, or even like layering a little bit of brown. So the idea is you want your brighter colors closer to the front and you want the colors to kind of dull down as you go back. Perspective. So perspective also creates a sense of depth and volume on a 2D surface. So for example, like we know our paper is flat, right? But when you have a vanishing point and you have lines converging back in space, that gives us an illusion that there's space there. So this doesn't work with everything. Perspective only works with, things going back in space, like a road or a river or a railroad perhaps, or buildings, or even like a path of some kind. But if you have things like that are going back in space, or even like lampposts, going back and getting smaller, but if you have something like that in your scene that you can use, it will definitely show the viewer that things are getting smaller as they go back in space. Okay, so those are our 6, guys. Those are our 6. So in the handout, you're going to have a square for each. So your goal is to show me perspective on one, color on another, detail, placement, size, and overlapping. Okay. Obviously, for color, you're going to actually need color. So that could be colored pencil. It could be crayon if that's what you have, whatever. But yeah, so the goal is you are illustrating on your own. I have an example that I'm posting in Classroom. I do not want you to do the exact same things that I'm doing, so choose your own examples, but you are showing me that concept, okay? You're showing me that you understand the concept. And if it's not clear, no worries, shoot me that email. But that's the whole idea. That's our goal. So, and again, if you don't have a printer at home, no worries. You can do this in your sketchbook. Just divide your page into, 6 pieces, and you can, write each technique, and then I will know what you're trying to do. And if you want to write me like little notes to explain what you're doing, that's cool too. Okay. All right. Good luck, guys. I'll see you soon.